Everything is a mess right now with the Minnesota Timberwolves. So much so that recently in a film session, Donte DiVincenzo and Julius Randle were seen visibly upset. On top of those reports, we have major updates about the Knicks and their future trade plans for Donte DiVincenzo. We're going to break down all of these latest reports today. But before we get started, guys, about 55% of you watching this video right now are not subscribed to the channel. We are on a mission to try to reach 25,000 subscribers, and we could really use your support. If you enjoy daily Knicks content like this, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button because it could really support all the great content that we're creating for you. And now, let's get started. Major update on the Knicks trade plans for Donte DiVincenzo. One of the hottest topics to talk about right now in Knicks Land is DiVincenzo potentially returning back to the team. And we have to thank the Minnesota Timberwolves for that. The Timberwolves are not having the season that they've envisioned. They've taken a step back as a team, especially when you consider that they were this close to the NBA Finals last year. This season, they are an average team both on offense and on defense. After making a number of moves, a number of trades, they still look like a team that doesn't have an identity. And Anthony Edwards, the star player of that team, questioned their offensive identity. Let's take a look at those following reports. According to Dan Moore, an NBA insider with the Wolves, he states the following. Anthony Edwards on the Wolves' offensive identity. We don't have blank on offense. We don't have no identity. We know I'm going to shoot a bunch of shots. We know Ju going to shoot a bunch of shots. And that's all we know. Not a great resounding compliment from your star player in Anthony Edwards about the team and their identity, and we're past the quarter-way mark of the season. If you thought that was insane, I promise you, it gets worse, much worse. As we saw, the Knicks recently destroyed the Minnesota Timberwolves, and after that game, they had a film session, and that film session, well, let's say it was emotional, to say the very least. Let's take a look at exactly what happened during that film session with the Wolves after the Knicks demolished them. Shout out to Ian Begley from SNY for giving us the following information. According to him, one note on DiVincenzo and the T-Wolves. It's a minor thing, but you know the Knicks really beat them, Minnesota he's talking about, handedly in Minnesota earlier this month. Cat had a really big game up there. And I heard the film session the next day for the Timberwolves. There were some strong emotions. Players were upset. Players including Donte DiVincenzo and Julius Randle were upset in that film session. Let me run that back one more time for you guys so everybody understands what was just said. In the film session, after the Knicks destroyed the Minnesota Timberwolves, Donte DiVincenzo and Julius Randle were upset in that film session. According to Begley, I would only assume what happened in that game the night before, maybe general themes. And yeah, there were some emotions during that film session. Let's see where Minnesota takes it from there. If they can get things straightened out, or if they continue to kind of flounder as you get closer to the trade deadline. This is insane. I cannot imagine what it feels like right now to be in that locker room in Minnesota, to be a fan of the Minnesota Timberwolves. I could only imagine how I would feel if this was happening right now in the Knicks locker room. Now, I know what a lot of you guys are thinking about right now. One team's disaster could be another team's opportunity, specifically with Donte DiVincenzo, because as you just heard, he's not happy. He's upset. And if you look at his play, he is nowhere close to being the player he even was for us last season. He is struggling. He is not having an impact. And a lot of people have been indicating that the main reason Donte looks like that is because he never wanted to be traded in the first place. We got to remember, we covered it a few days ago. Donte DiVincenzo still keeps in contact with a lot of Knicks players. He still watches the Knicks games. So a lot of people have come to the conclusion that he still wants to be part of this franchise. But we have to make sure we understand, can the Knicks get him back this year? Will they have to wait a year? Well, thanks to Ian Begley, a great NBA insider with SNY, he actually helped us understand what the Knicks trade plans for Donte DiVincenzo are moving forward. Let's break down these latest reports. Knicks insider Ian Begley recently discussed in his latest mailbag edition of his show the Knicks' potential future plans for Donte DiVincenzo. According to him, one thing on Donte, the Knicks cannot trade for him within the course of this season. If you trade away a player, there's a one-year moratorium on bringing them back to your team. So that's the timeline you're looking at for a potential Donte DiVincenzo trade. So I want to make something very clear. I said it a couple of days ago. I know there's been a lot of confusion around it, but let's clarify it once again. The Knicks are not going to be trading for Donte DiVincenzo again this season. Not because they don't want to, because they can't. There are rules in place that prevent it from happening. That only means that if the Knicks are going to get DiVincenzo back, the earliest they can get him back is next season and beyond that. I'm very happy we were able to clarify this situation because there was a lot of confusion surrounding this potential move the Knicks could make for Donte DiVincenzo and getting him back on this team. But let's continue here. According to Begley, I also don't think that Minnesota wants to trade Donte DiVincenzo. They really wanted Donte DiVincenzo in the deal that sent Karl-Anthony Towns to New York and Julius Randle to Minnesota. Donte was a key piece. So I would have to just assume that Minnesota does not want to move on from him. They want Donte to thrive in Minnesota. They want him to help them win games. And so I would assume their patience is going to continue with Donte as he continues to try to figure it out. And ultimately, Begley believes Donte will figure it out and he will be a big contributor off the bench for the T-Wolves. Okay, so the Knicks can't get Donte DiVincenzo back via trade this season. But what about their interest? We know that they can get him back next season or beyond that. Will they want to get him back? Will they want to make a trade for him? And if they do, what is his trade value? What are they going to have to give up to get DiVincenzo back on this team? Well, Ian Begley, he continues to hit home runs because he gave us that information as well, too. Shout out to Begley for giving us the following, according to him. And then, where are you at the one-year anniversary mark with Donte DiVincenzo? Is Donte a player who Minnesota definitely would not want to trade at that point? Or is he still not playing well? Maybe they look to move him. I think that's how you answer the question in terms of trade value. Just because there's so many unknowns there. Let's say Donte's playing well. Trade value is obviously going to be higher. 2 years left on his deal at that point. So it's not like he's an expiring contract. Minnesota at that point could hold a pretty high asking price for DiVincenzo, particularly if they're talking to the Knicks, because they would know that the Knicks would be very interested in bringing him back. So that clarifies the Knicks and their interest. Do the Knicks want to bring back Donte DiVincenzo? Are they interested? Absolutely. They want to bring Donte DiVincenzo back. Even Minnesota knows that the Knicks want to bring Donte DiVincenzo back. But because of that, they're likely going to have a very high asking price for DiVincenzo in any trade at that point in time. The only thing that could save the Knicks is if Donte continues to play poorly and he's not having a high trade value. If that happens, then maybe the Knicks can continue to fleece the Minnesota Timberwolves because they did that with the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. And if they trade back for DiVincenzo, Leon Rose might do the same thing once again. I think there's a lot of basketball to be played before you can talk about DiVincenzo being moved and going to another team, because we don't know what his trade value might be, because you do have a one-year restriction on the Knicks before they can make a trade for DiVincenzo. And that's the whole thing here. We don't understand what his value is going to be once the Knicks can make a trade for him. That's in a one-year time frame. At that point in time, we can revisit this conversation and think to ourselves, does it make sense for the Knicks to trade for DiVincenzo at that point? Does he make sense for this team at that point? Is his trade value low enough that Leon Rose and this Knicks front office will even entertain a trade at that point? Those are all the questions we're going to have to wait to get answered. And the only person that can answer that question is Leon Rose. And he can't even answer that question now. This is a question for a future Leon Rose. So we don't know the answers at this point. But something I can say, we obviously know Donte was a fan favorite here. The Knicks loved him, the fans loved him, and New York did not want to move on from him. They wanted to keep him as part of this team. Knowing all of that, it's obvious to say the Knicks would definitely entertain trying to get Donte back on this team. But they're also not going to make a move just to make a move. If at a 1 year's time frame, we look at the roster and we think to ourselves, Tom Thibodeau's playing a 9 to 10 man rotation. we look as good as we've ever looked before. We are winning, we are looking dominant, we are scoring the ball well, and our defense looks really good. Are we really going to think about making a trade at that point? Honestly speaking, I miss Donte DiVincenzo. I loved him off the bench. And if we can get him back for almost nothing in terms of trade value, I would love to get him back. The unfortunate part is he still has 2 years left on his contract. He's making a lot of money. And if the Knicks were going to trade for him, we are going to have to match the dollar for dollar figure because of where we are as a team. And that's going to have to be a next year situation, a next season situation, not even talking about right now. Way too far ahead for me to even predict where we're going to be. And let's say we win a championship before that time. You really think I'm going to be thinking about DiVincenzo, him coming back to the team? No, not at all. I'm going to be thinking about how we can keep that team that won the championship together for as long as possible, because that's going to be the main goal. Again, a lot of time in between now and when the Knicks can actually do something for DiVincenzo. But I am very happy to see the Knicks as a team doing well, playing better, and thriving as a team, especially after fleecing the Minnesota Timberwolves by getting Karl Anthony Towns on this team. And who knows, maybe in a year, we'll be calling the Timberwolves up again and fleecing them for a second time by getting DiVincenzo back on this team. But what about you guys? What do you think about these following reports indicating that not only did Donte DiVincenzo have problems in the past film session that he had with the Minnesota Timberwolves, potentially the Knicks have trade plans that could bring him back to the team, although those plans would likely have to wait a year before the Knicks could pull them off and get DiVincenzo back on this roster. Let me know how you feel about that in the comment section below, guys, because honestly, I would love to hear from you. But that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, go ahead and smash that like button, leave a comment below. And of course, guys, please subscribe to the channel. Until next time, Knicks fans, take care of yourself, your families, and each other. Peace and love.